As Bristol Rovers faced relegation to League Two. Obviously, Darrell Clarke has come back in since their relegation. He's trying to make sure he can add his promotion experience back to the club that he built such a great connection with a fair few years ago, 2014 to 2016. Back on a 3-year deal. He wants to make sure the project is there to bounce back immediately. There will be no sort of waiting around to make sure that this project kicks off. And they're going to want to make sure they do it. Obviously, a squad overhaul is probably likely, a bit of a change in multiple positions, making sure they have that depth, making sure they can compete down below as well. The worst case scenario would be back-to-back relegations, and that's something that Darrell Clarke won't even be thinking about, I'm sure, in terms of Bristol Rovers next season. This summer's a big one. They're not waiting around to spend either. Ambitions for 2025-26. We're going to go to our Bristol correspondent, Dan. Dan, just your take on where they are, their ambitions for next season. Darrell Clarke has great experience, and they aren't waiting around to do some signings as well, which is really, really good. So, how positive are things at the club at the moment? How much work needs to be sort of taking place for Bristol Rovers to have everything in line to have a good season next campaign? Dan, what are your thoughts, and how excited can the fans be?
For Bristol Rovers, certainly, I think after the fact that they were relegated, they needed a huge reset at the club, and they've acted fast to sort this out as well in the summer. I think that's really crucial. Of course, the first step was getting in a new manager following the departure of Inigo Calderon. Darrell Clarke, a fan's favourite with experience of Bristol Rovers, brought in really quickly as well, alongside, of course, their new director, of course, Ricky Martin, and them two have spoken together about the fact that they want to work in tandem with each other to bring about success at the club. Darrell Clarke has talked such a good talk so far in terms of how he wants the club to look, how he wants the players to behave and act, and ultimately the fact that he wants promotion with Bristol Rovers this season back from League Two and back into League One to right the wrongs of the relegation that they've just suffered. And then they've brought in 2 new assistant head coaches in John Stead and Rhys Carr. So they've acted fast in getting a backroom staff in for Darrell Clarke, and I'm sure that both Darrell Clarke and Ricky Martin have acted fast to get them in and to identify them, to scout them, and ultimately to put the project to the two of them, say, like, look, come work with us and we'll be a success here at the Memorial Stadium. So lots to be excited about, I think, from a Bristol Rovers perspective. Of course, they've also brought in a new transfer, their first of the summer, in Jack Sparks too. So things are starting to ramp up at the club, and it just shows just how fast they're wanting to act to get this reset done as quickly as possible, because I think that's what the club needed. It couldn't just rest on its laurels, and it couldn't just wait about for something to happen. They had to be proactive, and they had to go and get it done as well, and that's what they've done by bringing in the new head coach, bringing in the new director, Ricky Martin, and then bringing in 2 assistant head coaches for Darrell Clarke to work alongside at the club in John Stead and Rhys Carr. So fast progress certainly at Bristol Rovers, and I think supporters will like that. Obviously, they like the fact that they brought Darrell Clarke back to the club because he's someone who's had success with them before, knows the place as well. And I think just the fact that he's having his influence now, supporters will start to recognise that and start to think, yes, he knows what he's doing and he understands what is needed at the club after what happened. And so we can actually start to believe in them as a club once again. So I think you have to commend them for the swift and quick action they're taking. I think that was what was needed at the club just as a whole, because they were in a bit of a mess at the end of last season when they couldn't buy a win in League One and ultimately faced relegation under Inigo Calderon. Obviously, the board, they had these ambitions of pushing Bristol Rovers up through the table. That didn't happen in League One, and now they've gone down. It's very much a case of getting them back to there and then resuming those ambitions as well. Darrell Clarke's pointed out himself that he wants Bristol Rovers to be a League One club and a top-end League One club, and perhaps even pushing towards the Championship one day, where, of course, their city neighbours in Bristol City currently are as well. So lots going on at Bristol Rovers at the moment, lots to be perhaps excited about as well. It's just now a case of continuing this fast progress to make sure that they are competitive next season.